Hi, I'm Ardell. At a luxury resort I paid for, my own sister laughed in my face. She looked me up and down and said, "You're too cheap to be a billionaire's wife." Then she called security and had me dragged out, like a scam artist. But what she didn't know? An hour later, I stepped off a $190 million yacht, holding the hand of the man she once said would never choose someone like me. Now tell me, when your own blood tries to humiliate you in public, would you stay silent or let the truth walk in beside you? Before we dive in, what time are you listening and where from? Drop a comment. We read everyone. The air smelled like ocean salt and orchids, sweet and heavy, as I stepped through the glass doors of the Makana Coast Resort. Just the scent made me feel like I didn't belong. My shoes squeaked a little, cheap flats that had seen too many summers. I tugged the silk scarf tighter around my shoulders. It was pale blue, embroidered with golden threads at the edge. The last thing Julian gave me before the chemo took him. I kept it close like it could anchor me here, keep me from drifting into the shame I feared was waiting inside. The lobby was everything you'd expect from a high-end Hawaiian resort: vaulted ceilings, hand-carved wood, a wall-sized koi pond next to the concierge. The kind of place you only saw in commercials, unless, of course, your sister ran it. Blair had texted 2 weeks ago, "Big client event. Be my guest if you want. Families welcome." Her tone, even in writing, was as flat as ever, but part of me, maybe the part that still wanted a sister, read it as an olive branch. So I came. I looked around, clutching the scarf, families in linen, retirees sipping fresh juice in chilled glasses, spa music played low. I exhaled and stepped forward. That's when I saw her. Blair. She was standing by the front desk, arms crossed, clipboard in hand, hair pulled back so tight it might have hurt. Her smile didn't touch her eyes when she spotted me. She walked over in those stiletto heels like she was on a runway. "Well," she said, giving me a once-over, "you made it." "Hi, Blair," I managed, pushing a smile. "Thanks for inviting me." She looked past me like she was checking for paparazzi. "Did you even check in?" "I was about to," I replied, confused. "Your message said—" "Right. But the event's exclusive, Ardell. You can't just walk in off the street and—" She laughed, but it wasn't warm. "God, you still dress like that?" I felt the eyes. The couple behind me, the concierge, even a bellhop pausing with someone's luggage. "I wasn't trying to make a scene," I said quietly. "You said to come." Blair stepped closer and said in a voice loud enough for anyone nearby, "You're too cheap to be a billionaire's wife. Or is that story fake, too?" My breath caught. She knew better. She knew. But she didn't stop. "Guests saw someone sneaking through the side entrance earlier," she went on. "Funny coincidence." "What are you—" "I have to protect the brand, Ardell," she interrupted. "We don't need freeloaders ruining it." Then she turned her head and spoke into her radio. "Security to the front lobby." "No, Blair, wait." "I warned you," she hissed through clenched teeth. "This isn't your playground." 2 security guards in black polos walked up within seconds. The taller one looked uncertain. "Ma'am, we'll need you to come with us." I didn't argue. I just stood there, heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. As they took me by the arms, someone gasped. Phones were out. I heard a shutter click. I stumbled as they guided me toward the exit. That's when my scarf slipped from my shoulders and floated to the ground like a feather. I tried to turn and grab it, but the guards didn't pause. "Pick it up!" I shouted, twisting toward Blair. "It's important!" She didn't flinch, just crossed her arms and smiled. "We can't have scam artists ruining our brand," she said loud and clear, just as the doors opened. And that was it. Outside, the sun was blinding. I squinted and realized my shoes were gone, kicked off in the scuffle. I bent down, picked up my scarf with trembling hands, and stepped onto the stone path barefoot. My skin prickled, not from the heat, but from the stares, the murmurs, the judgment hanging in the air like thick humidity. I didn't cry. Not even when a little boy pointed at me and asked his mom, Why are they kicking that lady out? I walked. Down the path, past the valet station, across the front circle. I walked until the chatter faded, and all I could hear was the sound of waves pulling in and pulling away again. The beach was nearly empty. Just one couple lounging under a canopy, and a group of teenagers tossing a frisbee. I found a spot by the dunes, sat down, and buried my toes in the warm sand. How many times had Blair looked at me like that, like I was dirt she stepped over? In high school, she told people I was adopted. In college, she forgot to tell me when Mom had surgery, and when Julian died, she didn't even come to the funeral. She'd sent an email with one line, "I don't do sad events." But this was calculated. This was her using her job title to erase me in front of a crowd. I clutched the scarf to my chest, the threadbare silk now damp from my palms. I could almost hear Julian's voice in the breeze. "They won't see you coming, Ardell," he used to whisper when I doubted myself. "Let them think they're winning. Just don't stop walking." I leaned back and let the waves fill the silence. No more tears. No more begging to be included. Blair had shown me exactly where I stood, and I wasn't crawling back. My phone buzzed in the sand beside me. A single message lit up the screen. "He's waiting at the dock. They're ready for you." I read it twice, barely breathing. Then I stood, held my scarf tight. And as I turned from the waves, my bare feet aching, I saw the white yacht waiting at the far dock, just like he promised. The dock creaked under my bare feet as I stepped away from the sand, each step pushing against the ache building in my soles. The yacht gleamed under the afternoon light, white as bone, anchored like it had been waiting for me all along. No staff rushed down, no fanfare, just one man on the deck. Colton. He didn't wave, he didn't call out. He just stood there, in a crisp linen shirt, sleeves casually rolled, hands in his pockets like he always did when trying to read my face from afar. But as I came closer, the tension I didn't know I was carrying unraveled all at once. My scarf fluttered in the breeze as I stumbled onto the last plank, and he stepped forward without a word. "You look like you fought the ocean and won," he said gently, wrapping his arms around me before I even had the strength to reply. I didn't cry. Not at first. But something in his voice, so familiar, so safe, triggered everything I'd swallowed back. The shame, the fury, the humiliation of being thrown out like a stray dog. It cracked inside me. My arms clutched his shirt, and the tears came soundless, like a storm that had no thunder, only rain. He didn't shush me. He didn't ask what happened. He just held me, long enough for my breathing to slow. "Come inside," he said, brushing sand off my shoulder. "They don't get to have the final word." Inside the yacht, everything smelled like cedar and sea. The air conditioning hummed low. One of the staff silently handed me a soft robe and towel. I caught sight of my reflection in a narrow mirror, hair tangled, mascara smudged, the silk scarf still clutched in one hand like a lifeline. I looked like someone who'd lost everything, but I hadn't. 2 years ago, I'd met Colton at a coastal art exhibit I curated in Mendocino. He never said a word, just stood back and watched as I walked a collector through the gallery. That night, every single one of my pieces sold, anonymously. I didn't find out until the following month when a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a sketch I'd made years earlier of a little girl climbing a tree barefoot. A note was scribbled in the corner. "She reminded me of you." I didn't respond, but the next month he showed up at another exhibit. This time he introduced himself. It wasn't flashy. There was no billionaire entrance, no luxury suit, just Colton, quiet, thoughtful, asking about brushwork instead of my relationship status. He never once mentioned money. 6 months later, he proposed. No ring, just him, barefoot on the same beach I cried on this morning. I didn't say yes, not right away. "You sure about marrying someone the rest of my family calls a waste of paint and pity?" I'd asked, only half joking. "I don't care what they call you," he replied. "I care what you call yourself. And if you'll let me, we'll build something they'll never get to touch." We married 3 weeks later. Private courthouse. 2 witnesses, no name change, no social media. It was sacred, not a performance. I didn't want Blair knowing. I didn't want her turning it into a weapon or a headline in her private circle of elite cruelty. Colton understood. Still, he warned me gently one night as we lay in bed. One day I'll walk beside you in front of them, and they'll regret every word they ever said to you. I didn't believe him then. Not really. But today, I started to. Back in the present, I followed him to the upper deck where a small table had been set with fresh fruit, water, and 2 glasses. Not champagne, not even wine, just water, cold and clear, with lemon slices floating like tiny suns. "No celebration," he said, handing me the glass, "until you say it's time." I smiled faintly. "You always knew this day would come." "I didn't know how," he admitted, "but I knew they'd try to crush you eventually. You just shine too bright, baby." I looked out toward the horizon. From here, the resort was just a glint of stone and glass nestled against the curve of the island. From this distance, it looked peaceful, polished, like nothing ugly had ever happened inside, but I knew better. Colton rested his hand lightly on mine. "You don't owe them anything." "I know." "So, do you want to go back?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood, walking slowly to the edge of the railing. The wind had picked up slightly, tugging at the hem of my robe. My scarf, still clutched in one hand, fluttered again. Then I turned my head toward him and nodded once. We didn't need to say another word. He gave a subtle signal to the captain. The yacht began to move, smooth, silent, cutting through the ocean with a grace that made my earlier humiliation feel like a distant, broken thing I could leave behind. And as we sailed toward the resort dock in total silence, except for the sound of waves parting before me, I felt it for the first time in years. Control. Colton stood beside me, hand steady on the small of my back, while the 2 yacht staff who accompanied us blended into the shadows like they'd done this 100 times. I didn't ask them for protection. I didn't need to. Their presence said enough. The beach shimmered ahead, littered with white loungers, decorative fire pits, and clusters of resort guests sipping drinks too sweet for the humidity. I could already hear Blair's voice before I saw her, sharp, performative, dripping with the confidence of someone who believed they'd already won. As we stepped off the dock, the warm sand curled between my toes again. My robe caught the breeze, dancing around my legs. Colton didn't let go of my hand, not once. My fingers curled around his like lifelines. We walked as one, me barefoot and windswept, him crisp and composed in his linen blazer. Heads turned. Slowly at first, then faster. A few gasps slipped through the crowd, barely audible over the clinking glasses and ambient music. But what really made people pause was the yacht. It loomed offshore, white and sleek, like something out of a Monaco daydream. They weren't used to seeing it docked here. Blair's voice sliced through the gathering murmurs like a knife. "Security must have missed one," she laughed, not bothering to lower her voice. Her words weren't even clever, just loud enough for her circle of friends to hear and snicker. She was standing with a group of men in blazers and 2 women in heels too thin for sand. All of them held glasses of champagne, my family's currency of validation. Colton said nothing. Neither did I. Blair turned. Her oversized sunglasses sat too high on her face, hiding most of her expression, but the smirk was unmistakable. She took 2 confident steps toward us. "I thought we escorted you out already," she said, like a hostess at a country club catching someone sneaking past the dress code. Or did someone forget to do their job? No one laughed this time. I stayed quiet. Colton kept his eyes on her, unreadable. Blair tilted her head and glanced over at a staffer holding a radio near the tiki bar. "Do we have someone from security again? She's trespassing." Before the staffer could respond, someone else emerged. Tan suit, wireless earpiece, polished shoes nearly sinking in the sand. He moved quickly, expression tight with confusion. It was the resort's guest relations manager. His badge said Reed. As soon as his eyes landed on Colton, he froze mid-step. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. "Mr. Morrow," Reed stammered, adjusting his tie even though it wasn't crooked. We weren't informed of your arrival today. Had we known, of course the executive suite is still available. We can prepare." Colton removed his sunglasses slowly, letting them rest in his hand. "And this," he said, voice low but pointed, "is my wife. Care to explain why she was dragged out of this resort like a criminal earlier?" The silence that followed was louder than Blair's earlier jab. Guests nearby turned away, pretending not to stare. A phone appeared, recording. Another followed. Blair's face didn't move at first. She looked from Colton to me, then to Reed, then back again. The smirk was gone. I didn't know she was with anyone important," she said finally, her voice a strange mix of defiance and disbelief. I turned to her, not to gloat, just to finish the sentence she couldn't. "But I was family, wasn't I?" She didn't answer. Couldn't. The air between us buzzed with every unspoken memory, every dismissal, every backhanded comment, every time she told me to stay in my lane. Colton turned toward Reed. "We'll take care of the press release," he said calmly. "You may want to check your staff training." Reed nodded quickly and disappeared like smoke. A few feet away, someone whispered, "That's her husband?" Another, "He owns the yacht?" Phones dropped to sides, eyes darted away. Blair's champagne glass tilted slightly. Her grip had gone soft. She blinked, mouth parting, no sound coming out. I didn't know," she said again, softer this time. A woman in a gold cocktail dress stepped away from Blair's group and joined another circle farther down the beach. Colton didn't speak. He didn't have to. I stepped a little closer, meeting Blair eye to eye. "You're the one who made me feel like I didn't belong," I said, "like I was something to tolerate. That ends today." She backed up half a step, then another. Finally, she turned and walked toward a lounger near the tiki bar. Her knees buckled slightly as she sat, hands gripping the armrest too tightly. A few moments passed. Then she whispered to no one in particular, "You're her husband?" I leaned in just enough so only she could hear. "And you're the one who thought being cruel made you powerful." She didn't answer, didn't blink. She just stared at the sand, stunned, silent. Behind me, the music played on. Colton touched my elbow lightly and I turned to walk away with him, past the stunned party guests, past the servers who no longer dared look away, past every whisper that once told me I was less. We didn't rush. We didn't speak. But Blair's voice followed as we left, trembling. She stood and followed us, because she knew something I didn't. Yet. Blair's voice trembled as she stood and followed us, because she knew something I didn't. Yet. We didn't rush. The walk back to the private cabana was deliberate, quiet. My sandals dangled from one hand, Colton's fingers loosely wrapped around the other. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of hibiscus and salt, but my thoughts felt colder than anything the ocean could ever bring in. Behind us, I could hear Blair's steps crunching in the sand. Uneven. Hesitant. "Please," she called out. "Just let me explain. I didn't know it was you on that yacht." I paused. Just outside the shaded entrance of the cabana, I turned. "But you knew who he was, didn't you?" Her mouth parted but no words came. Only her eyes, flickering, darting, calculating. Colton let go of my hand and stepped just enough to the side to give us space, but close enough that his presence grounded me. I walked into the cabana, not bothering to offer her an invitation. She followed anyway. Inside, the curtains fluttered slightly in the breeze. A tray of untouched fruit and a sweating glass pitcher of tea sat on the center table. No one touched a thing. "You met him before, didn't you?" I asked again. Calm, controlled. Blair sat on the edge of the lounger, legs crossed too tightly, fingers gripping her sunglasses. "It was years ago. At a gala at the Four Seasons. I didn't know who he was then. Not fully." Colton's eyes narrowed. "You flirted?" She winced at the accuracy. "A little, maybe." I didn't think anything of it. He didn't respond. I nodded slowly. And then a few weeks later you saw him again, in my gallery. Blair didn't answer. You let me believe he was just another quiet art lover, I said. You never once said, "Hey, I've met him before." You knew exactly who he was. She looked down at the floor. I didn't want to interfere. You looked happy. No, I said, stepping closer. You didn't want me to have something you couldn't. Her jaw tightened. You always got the love. I got the expectations, the titles, the pressure. You were the wild one, the creative spirit, the poor dear they had to tolerate. And somehow, you still had all the warmth. I leaned against the edge of the table. And that bothered you enough to try and strip me of it, in public? I didn't think you'd really married him, she said. I thought you were just playing a role, again. I laughed quietly, not because it was funny, because it was familiar. She looked up. You don't get it. If you married someone like him, you'd finally outrank me. No more family jokes about our resident starving artist. No more pity. You'd win. I didn't know we were in a competition, I said, keeping my voice steady. Blair's mouth twisted. Everything was always a competition, Ardell. You just chose not to see it. I felt something shift in my chest, not anger, just a quiet ache, the kind that only happens when someone you grew up loving chooses to hurt you again and again, and then pretends it was for your own good. I sat across from her. And what about Mom and Dad? When they stopped taking my calls? When the checks I mailed home came back returned to sender? She flinched. You told them I'd run away for money, didn't you? She nodded barely. I told them you were lying about being independent. I said you were with some guy who paid your way. I made it sound like you were being used. I blinked, steadying my breath. And they believed you. She didn't deny it. They were already unsure, I just nudged that doubt a little. I stood, walked slowly to the open side of the cabana where the ocean shimmered past the palms. You turned my own parents against me. Over what? So you'd look better in the family newsletter? So the country club whispers would say, at least Blair's still respectable? It wasn't about the job, she whispered. Not anymore. I turned. Colton had been silent, leaning against the far post, arms folded. But now he stepped forward. I'm not letting this slide, Blair, he said. If this is about money or reputation, you need to make a choice, because I won't let Ardell keep carrying your cruelty in silence. Blair's eyes brimmed with tears she refused to let fall. It's not about any of that anymore. Then what is it? I asked. Her shoulders sank. She reached into her small purse, one of those designer pieces she always claimed I wouldn't understand, and pulled out a folded paper. The edges were frayed, the ink faded. She handed it to me. My name was on the envelope, in my handwriting, addressed to our parents. Unopened. My hands trembled slightly as I took it. This came back to me, she said. I found it in Dad's study drawer a month ago. I never told you. I looked down at the letter, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something colder than betrayal, something heavier than anger. I felt erased. I sat down slowly on the cushioned bench inside the cabana, my hand still clutching the envelope Blair had just handed me. The sky outside was turning softer, that in-between hour where the sun began to slip beneath the horizon, but hadn't yet surrendered to night. Seagulls were quieter now, the wind had turned gentler, but inside me? A storm was gathering. I stared at the letter. My own handwriting. My own name on the front. Except the flap was still sealed, untouched, unopened. I wrote this the night I left home, I said softly, my voice hoarse like it had traveled through years of silence. It was snowing. I remember because I stood outside the front door for 5 minutes, hoping someone would come out before I had to let go. Blair didn't say a word. She just stood there, arms crossed, avoiding my gaze. Colton stayed by the entrance, not interrupting, but present, a steady weight behind me. I slowly peeled the envelope open. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the ache of memory. The paper inside had yellowed slightly with time. I unfolded it with care. It began with, "Dear Mom, I'm not running away. I need you to know that. I'm choosing a life that lets me breathe, one that doesn't make me feel like I'm constantly disappointing someone just for being who I am. I know Blair has already filled your ears with her opinions, but please, please, don't believe I'm lost. I'm finding myself. Slowly. I just wish you'd want to know that version of me. I don't need your approval, but I need your love, and maybe your grace, even once." The silence afterward was full and unforgiving. I hadn't read that letter since I wrote it. I forgot how hopeful I had once been, that I'd believed, even for a moment, that someone might have read it and tried. Colton walked toward me and placed a quiet hand on my shoulder. I looked up. Blair's face was pale, lips trembling. "I thought you'd burn that," I said without looking at her. "I almost did," she whispered, "but I couldn't." "Because it would have been too cruel?" I asked, still calm. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Because I knew if she read it, if Mom saw those words, she'd call you, she'd come after you, and then everything I'd worked for, all of it, it wouldn't matter." "You mean your job?" I narrowed my eyes. "Your corner office built on silence, or your spotless image built by stomping over me?" Blair blinked rapidly. "You don't understand. I lived in your shadow. Even when you left, people compared us. Said you were the heart and I was just the head." "And you resented me for that?" "I needed to matter," she snapped, then bit her lip. "Dad told Mom you didn't want to be contacted, that you needed space, that you changed your number on purpose." "He told her that?" My breath caught. She nodded. "And I didn't correct him. I was scared. I knew if she read that letter, you'd be back in her good graces. Maybe she'd pick you again." I stood, slower this time. My knees weren't shaky, just tired. "You didn't just want space. You wanted the whole room." "You think it was easy?" Blair said. "Mom adored you. I was the one who kept the house running. I paid the bills when Dad got sick. I stayed, I showed up. But all she talked about was, if only Ardell called. So yes." I hid the letter. I took a breath. "You didn't just take my place. You erased me." She looked at the ground. I sat again, this time setting the folded letter gently on the low bamboo table between us. My eyes wandered out through the slats in the cabana walls. The ocean was darkening. A few torches had been lit along the path to the main house. Shadows stretched longer across the sand. "I tried calling home 3 times that first year," I said, softer now. "You answered every time. Said Mom was resting, said she wasn't ready. I believed you." "She wasn't ready," Blair whispered. "No, she was never told." Blair didn't deny it. "You decided what version of me she deserved, and you chose the one that made you feel better." Blair's voice broke. "I wanted my version of success to be enough, for once." I tilted my head. "It came at a cost. You just didn't expect the receipt." Colton stepped forward now, finally speaking. "If this was about business or image, fine, but it went beyond that. You rewrote history. You altered the truth of your own family." "I know," Blair said. "It's not about the job anymore. It's about what I couldn't have." "Then say it," I said, out loud. Her chin quivered. "I wanted Mom to love me more. I thought if you were gone, she'd have no choice." No one said anything for a long while. The waves outside had grown slower, gentler, as if the tide itself had nothing more to give. I finally stood again, my movement deliberate. I took the letter and folded it one last time, setting it between us like a boundary. "I'm not interested in fixing your version of success," I said. "I'm interested in telling the truth, out loud, and starting there." Colton met my eyes. "What do you want to do now?" I turned to him. "It's time to rewrite the story, and it starts with a call." I picked up my phone from the table, unlocked it, and stared at the contact I had once memorized but never dared to dial again. Then I pressed the button. The line rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. She answered. Her voice was quiet, older, but still hers. Ardell? Is it really you? The signal crackled faintly as I stepped out onto the veranda of the cabana, the ocean breeze brushing strands of hair across my face. My thumb hovered above the call button. For a moment, I considered putting the phone down, but instead, I pressed it. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and then... Ardell? Her voice broke through the static like sunlight through heavy clouds, shaky, disbelieving, familiar in a way that reached into my chest and squeezed. "It's me, Mom," I whispered, my own voice barely holding together. "It's really me." There was silence on the other end, a stunned kind. I could hear her breathing, then the sharp inhale of someone who'd been holding back a sob for years. I thought I was dreaming," she said finally, her voice cracking. "Is it really you? Are you okay?" I swallowed hard. "I'm okay now. I didn't know if you'd pick up or if you'd even want to hear from me." "Want to?" she repeated, almost as if I'd insulted her. "Baby, I've waited for this call for years." I sat down slowly on the edge of the lounger. My knees felt weak in a way that had nothing to do with fatigue. "I left a letter," I said quietly. "That night, I left it under the door. I thought you'd read it. I hoped you'd understand." There was a pause. Then she spoke, slower this time. "Your father told me you didn't want contact, that you wanted to be left alone, that you'd chosen a different life, one without us." I closed my eyes. The ache in my chest flared again. "No. I just wanted a life that didn't feel like a cage," I said, my voice trembling. "I never asked to be cut off. I begged for peace, for space, not for silence." I could hear her breath catch again. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I never saw that letter. I swear to you, Ardell, I never knew. I thought you were angry, that you'd moved on, without me." "I tried calling, a few times," I added softly. "But Blair always answered, said you weren't home, or that you weren't ready to talk." There was a sharp inhale on her end. "She told me the same thing, about you," she said, her voice thick with disbelief. "That you didn't want me to reach out. I would sit in your old room when no one was home, just sit there. I even wrote letters to you, but I never mailed them. I didn't want to intrude if you truly didn't want me anymore." My throat tightened. I couldn't speak for a moment. "You were always wanted," I said finally, my voice raw. "I just thought I wasn't." The silence between us then wasn't empty. It was full of years lost, words unsaid, hugs that never happened. But in that space something shifted, like a bridge, once burned, now flickering back into being. "I want to see you," she said softly. "I want to look at the woman you've become, not the story they told me about you." A tear slipped down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. "I'd like that," I whispered. "More than you know." We stayed on the line a while longer, not talking much, just breathing together, like we used to during late-night storms when I was little. I could almost smell the lavender she always wore, almost feel her hand in my hair. When we finally said goodbye, the sky had shifted into twilight, that soft, golden blur before darkness. I stepped down onto the beach path where Colton waited, standing near the start of the cliffs. He didn't say a word, just extended his arm. I took it, grateful for the steadiness of his silence. We walked slowly along the winding edge of the resort, the waves below crashing in steady rhythm. My mind played back every word of the conversation, every moment my mother had doubted herself, every lie she'd been fed, every letter she never got, and I knew this wasn't just about reclaiming my place. It was about revealing every piece of the truth that had been buried beneath years of manipulation. My phone buzzed as we reached a crest in the path where the ocean stretched endlessly before us. I looked down. A message from Blair. "Dad wants to meet. He's angry. I think he knows what you're doing." I didn't hesitate. I typed back, "Good. So do I." Then I turned to Colton. Let's head home, I said quietly. It's time I saw my mother, and time I saw the will. The wind caught the hem of my dress as we turned back. Below us, the water shimmered in the last light of day, calm on the surface, but powerful beneath. 2 days after we landed, I sat at my desk in Houston with the envelope in front of me. The late morning sun filtered through the blinds, drawing lines across my hands as I traced the edge of the flap. I had waited until Colton took his morning walk before opening it. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to be alone when the past came crawling back in black ink and legal jargon. The seal broke with a soft tear. Inside was a folded will, dated 3 years ago. My name wasn't anywhere near the top. Instead, Blair's was written in bold letters, followed by the chilling line, "Full authority over assets and property, activated upon medical or legal incapacitation of Michael Wexler." I stared at it for a moment longer than necessary. Then I flipped to the back, and there it was, Clause 12B. Any alteration to estate division must be countersigned by my legal spouse to be considered binding. My heart stopped. He hadn't just tried to cut me out, he had tried to make it look legal. I grabbed my phone, fingers stiff, and called the one person who could confirm the truth. She answered on the second ring. "Mom," I said, skipping hello. "Yes, honey? I need to ask you something. Serious." I swallowed. "Did you ever sign anything Dad gave you about the estate?" She paused. "Years ago he gave me something about stocks, said it was just some adjustment. I asked if I needed to sign it and he told me it wasn't necessary." My eyes narrowed. "You never signed anything?" "No," she replied firmly. "Not one document." I could feel heat rising behind my eyes, not from grief this time, but rage. He lied to you. I could almost hear her heart breaking through the silence that followed. That evening, I met Colton in the kitchen, the will open on the counter beside my laptop. I'd sent scans to Hannah, my old friend from college, now a corporate lawyer in Dallas. 30 minutes later, her name lit up my screen. "You sitting down?" she asked, not even saying hello. "Yes." She took a breath. "Clause 12B is enforceable. If your mom didn't sign, that revision is legally void." My hand went to my throat. "What does that mean?" "It means the prior will still stands, the one tied to the original Wexler Trust, your grandfather's design. It names you Ardell. You hold 51%. I blinked. "That's not possible." "Oh, it's very possible. Michael didn't control the trust. He was just the temporary executor until you turned 35. That clause was embedded back when you were born, honey. Your grandfather protected you." My legs felt weak. "So Blair has been sitting on a throne made of air," she said bluntly. "All of it. The power, the bank accounts, the property. Technically, she's been acting beyond her rights." I looked at Colton, who had walked in during the call. He tilted his head, as if waiting for me to breathe. "I need to call a meeting," I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. "I'm not hiding behind emails or lawyers. This time they'll hear it from me." That night, I sent a message to Blair. "We need to meet, Dad included. I'll bring legal counsel. I suggest you do the same." She read it within minutes, then responded with, "He's angry. He wants to see you. Fine, but not at a courthouse." I replied, "Then we meet at the old house. Neutral ground, where it all began." A few seconds passed, then, "Fine, but you won't like what you find." Colton stood next to me, reading over my shoulder. "She's bluffing," he said quietly. "Maybe, but I'm not." I turned and looked him in the eye. "No more running." We stayed up late that night, both too wired to sleep. I moved to the window after midnight, a soft breeze slipping through the open pane. Houston's skyline shimmered in the distance, and I held a photo of my grandfather, taken on my 12th birthday. We were standing side by side at that same house, the old house, his hand on my shoulder, his smile wide and knowing. "I used to think power meant shouting the loudest," I murmured. Colton walked over and put a hand on my back. "But sometimes," I whispered, "it's in the quiet. It's in the details no one thinks matter." And that's exactly where they'd failed. They thought I was gone. But they forgot I had roots, and roots don't forget where they were planted. Colton parked at the edge of the long, graveled driveway. The house loomed ahead like a monument to everything that had gone unsaid in our family for decades. I stepped out slowly, the morning sun sharp and clear over the hedges. My father still kept trimmed to military perfection. 3 days had passed since we returned from the resort. Not a word from Blair, not even a whisper from Dad. But this was the reckoning. I didn't come alone. Colton walked beside me, silent but grounded, and my attorney, Miss Latham, followed, holding a simple black folio. My heart didn't race. It held steady, like it knew the outcome before I did. Inside, the living room hadn't changed. Same rigid couches, same stale scent of over-polished wood. Blair sat prim and defensive at the end of the long table, Dad, stone-faced, beside her. 2 men I recognized from the board, our so-called family advisors, shifted in their seats when I walked in. "We don't know what you think you're doing," Dad said flatly, arms crossed. I laid my bag down gently. "Actually, you're about to find out." I didn't sit. Miss Latham opened the folio and handed me the documents I'd reviewed a dozen times. I spread them out on the table, careful and precise. "These are the original trust papers," I began, "signed by Grandpa Elias, dated March 14, 1999. They clearly state that voting control of the family trust passes to me, his youngest granddaughter, upon his death, unless legally revoked by both of his children in writing." I looked directly at Dad. Clause 19A, joint parental signatures. There was a pause. "Mom," I said, turning the iPad toward them, "is on the call." My mother's image filled the screen. She looked tired but focused, sitting in her kitchen back in Arizona. "I never signed anything," she said simply. "He told me it was about reallocating some stocks. I never saw these documents." One of the advisors leaned in, frowning. "If there's no joint parental consent on record, then the revision doesn't hold. The original terms remain in effect." Blair's lips parted like she was about to argue, but no words came. Her face lost its color. Dad's fists hit the table. "That was private family business." I met his stare. "No, that was fraud. You altered legal ownership without consent and misrepresented the truth to every single person in this room." There was a sharp inhale from one of the board men. Colton shifted slightly beside me, not aggressive, just present, steady. I reached into my bag again and pulled out another folder. "And since we're laying everything out," I slid the file across the table. "This is from Marlowe International's HR department, Blair's file." Blair's eyes flicked down, then back up. Her fingers twitched. Her resume was falsified. Her job title? Vice President of Operations? Never approved. She doctored internal performance reviews, padded job descriptions, and bypassed the interview board using family referrals. I held up a printed email. "And here's the whistleblower who flagged it. Someone from inside Marlowe, copied to legal. They were ignored until recently." Miss Latham nodded. "If this reaches Marlowe's compliance office, I'll be blacklisted," Blair spat. "No," I said calmly. "You'll be investigated, then fired, then sued." Dad opened his mouth, but Miss Latham was quicker. "Per Trust Regulation 7D, a vote can be called by the majority beneficiary to remove any representative engaged in unethical conduct." I turned to Blair. "I already called the vote. These are the signed decisions from 3 of the 5 board members." I placed them on the table, neatly. "Effective immediately, you're no longer a representative of the Bundy Trust." Silence cracked through the room like thunder. Blair shoved her chair back, jaw clenched. "You set this up. You've been plotting." "You gave me the motive," I said evenly. "You handed me the proof." Dad rose abruptly, but before he could move, Colton stepped forward. Hands at his sides, voice even. "Don't." They stared each other down, 2 men who'd never liked each other. But only one of them had anything left to lose. I adjusted my coat and turned to the advisors. "This meeting is concluded. I'll have our counsel handle the transition paperwork." Then I looked to Blair. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. At the door, I paused, the light from the hallway falling in behind me. And if either of you tries to interfere with me or Mom, again, I won't be this gentle. The front door creaked as Colton opened it. I stepped out first, leaving the weight of that house behind. That, he whispered as we walked toward the car, was the quietest mic drop I've ever seen. I didn't answer. But in that silence I felt something shift, not just power, but peace. As we drove away, I checked my inbox, and there it was, a message from the board of Blair's company. The subject line read, "Inquiry request regarding executive conduct." I didn't click right away. I let the words sit there, glowing back at me on the screen as the Texas skyline blurred past the passenger window. 3 days passed before I replied. I waited until I had slept a full night, waited until I'd watered the plants on my porch, made coffee slowly, and sat beside my mother while she told me about a pie crust recipe she used to bake when she was young. Then I opened the email and answered, "Yes, I'm willing to speak." The next morning, I walked into the glass-paneled headquarters of Blair's firm, not as her sister, not as the girl they once mocked for being too soft. I came as a witness. Colton offered to come with me, but I asked him to wait outside. Some battles you need to walk into alone. Inside the boardroom, 4 executives sat in still silence. One of them, Ms. Kinley, VP of Compliance, spoke first. "Ms. Rowe, thank you for coming in. We've received several documents from you. Before we proceed formally, we'd like to ask, do you stand behind their accuracy?" I nodded. Every line. She folded her hands. We were already suspicious, to be honest. Her performance metrics didn't match her credentials. The resume was just too clean. Another board member added, "And then there were the erratic spending approvals. It didn't make sense." I didn't gloat. I didn't mention the years Blair spent whispering to family about how I lacked ambition or drive. I simply handed them the truth. 2 days later, her photo vanished from the company's website. Just like that. The press didn't explode, but the whispers were everywhere. Quiet headlines began to circulate through finance blogs and niche legal forums. "Exec suspended amid allegations of fabricated background, whistleblower tip confirms concerns about VP's employment history." I never shared the news publicly. I didn't need to. Watching her face dissolve from those pristine online pages was enough. The following week, the weather turned soft. Spring sun, gentle breeze, and the scent of blooming jasmine outside my new community center. I named it the Hearthstone Circle. We opened quietly, just as I'd wanted. No grand speeches, no celebrities, just people who had lived through quiet financial destruction and needed a place to rebuild. At the ribbon cutting, my mother took my hand in hers. I hadn't expected her to come. She wore a pale blue jacket, simple but elegant, and her hair was pinned the way she used to wear it when I was little. "You came back stronger than I ever imagined," she whispered. Her voice cracked near the end, but she didn't cry. She just looked at me like she finally saw the woman I'd become. Colton stood a little behind us, arms crossed, sunglasses on, the way he always does when he's trying not to cry either. Inside, volunteers were already helping 2 women navigate credit rebuild strategies and connect with legal aid. A soft buzz of quiet restoration. That's what I had built. It was a few afternoons later when Blair showed up. I'd just finished a bookkeeping class with 2 clients and was pouring coffee into paper cups when the front door creaked open. No cameras, no entourage, just her. Her heels were scuffed, her blouse wrinkled. She stood in the middle of the entryway like someone who had lost the ability to move forward or back. "I lost everything," she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't flinch. I didn't rush toward her. I walked over slowly, set down the coffee pot, and replied, "Then, maybe now you'll understand what it felt like." We stood there for a moment, 2 sisters who'd grown up in the same house but lived entirely different lives. There were no apologies, no fireworks, just a long silence stretched between us like an old bridge we were both too tired to cross. She nodded once, turned around, and walked out the way she came. That night, I stood alone on the balcony outside my office at the center. The lights inside had dimmed. Most volunteers had gone home. Below me, I could hear wind brushing the hedges and the faint buzz of porch lights flickering on. Some fights aren't won with fury, they're won with quiet truth. I closed my eyes, placed my hand over my heart, and smiled. And this time, I didn't just win. I healed. So next time someone laughs at you for being too simple, just smile. That's the sound of them underestimating you.